On this edition of FedGov Today with Francis Rose, a clear call to industry as GSA overhauls the FAR.
This next year, it's going to be a wild year. A lot is going to change. We need industry to be at the table, to participate. We always say we want your comments on the rulemaking process, and we're going to want that. But we want you to engage in every aspect of the things that are changing.
GSA's Jeff Kosis on FedGov Today in just a moment. First, though, the Coast Guard will invest $350 million to remake its autonomous systems fleet. It'll do that through a new office that aligns with the Pentagon's new portfolio management strategy. Anthony Antonioli, the first leader of that office, the Program Executive Office for Robotics and Autonomous Systems, will tell you about his office and the investments it'll make on FedGov Today TV. You'll see it Sunday morning at 10:30 on ABC7 in Washington and on the FedGov Today YouTube channel. You also see it around the world on the American Forces Network. If you miss it on the air, you can watch the show on demand at fedgovtoday.com. Phase 2 of the revolutionary FAR overhaul is underway. The General Services Administration's Office of Government-Wide Policies leading the effort. At ACT-IAC's Imagination ELC recently, I asked the senior procurement executive at GSA, Jeff Kosis, what the new year will look like for the FAR overhaul.
You said something about the FAR overhaul when we were talking backstage and earlier in the week that I thought was really striking. The original FAR, you pointed out, took 5 years for him to come up with it, 6 months to socialize it throughout the community, and then 41 years to get to where you guys started in the spring. You've revamped it in 5 months. You populated it for 1 month in the middle of the shutdown, and now here we are getting ready for phase 2. What's the implication in your view? Why is that timeline, especially the truncated timeline that you're on now, why is that important to the product that you're going to get?
It's important because what we're really talking about is cultural change. Change the rules, fine. We can change the rules, we can change regulations. But will people use it? Will they understand it? Will they embrace it? And those things are not going to happen if we don't have a full cultural change strategy. The codified FAR, as you just said, it took 41 years. During that time, tens of thousands in government and in industry had to learn the rule book, how to operate within it, how to make things happen. It was a very dense rule book, very heavy on must-do type statements. In trying to go create a much more flexible, a much more authority to the contracting officers, much more empowerment. We can put that in the rules, and we did. But to change the culture, for people to learn that, for government to know how to buy in that environment, for industry to know how to sell in that environment, those things are going to take time. They're going to take communication. They're going to take relentless reinforcement. Those are not things that are going to happen in a matter of weeks. But the degree of change, the massive differences from the old FAR to where we'll be a year from now, those are things that we really want the entire community here. We need government to know how to buy in the new environment. We need industry to track and be aware and be connected as the rule book is changing, and to do all we can to reinforce the cultural change.
There's a couple of things there I want to follow up on, but first, take me through the nuts and bolts of where you are now. Phase 1 is complete. Take me through what that comprised, and then what's next and what the timeline looks like for that, Jeff.
Sure. So the executive order dropped on April 15th. It told us to rewrite the FAR within 180 days and to do so by deviation. That was one of a series of executive orders that had dropped. There have actually been 68 executive orders, or OMB memos, or presidential memos that I'm tracking that impact either federal acquisition or GSA. So partially, Francis, we had to look, what were the common themes across all of those, and how do we weave that into the rewrite? From the start, we also recognized this is not just taking things out of the FAR. If that's all we did, we would leave everybody completely lost. So phase 1 was the rewrite of the FAR and the creation of the strategic acquisition guidance. From a metrics standpoint, in phase 1, 49 master deviations to rewrite the entire rule book. About a 25% reduction 230,000 words, 486 pages, 114 clauses and provisions removed. And in giving that empowerment to contracting officers and to industry, we removed 2,724 must-do type of statements. From a strategic acquisition guidance, created three big flavors, three big pieces of that. The FAR Companion, an operational guide for working contracting officers, contract specialists. The the practitioner albums, those are deep dives that get into use cases, discretionary best practices to understand how to navigate in this environment. And the category management buying guide. The buying guide is a deep dive into government-wide contracts. You can think of it as your category management solution finder. That's what happened in phase one. That's what happened between April 15th and end of September.
So not much.
Yeah, just a day or two, right?
Just a couple of things.
Right. So now we fast forward post-shutdown to mid-November, and we kick off with phase two. If we go back to the executive order, it told us to rewrite the FAR, but all we've done at this moment is issue deviations. We have not codified any of that. So one part of phase two, it's actually turning this into rulemaking. Over the next 12 months, you're going to see us issue a series of proposed rules. We're starting with the text from the FAR overhaul, but that's not the text that you're going to see in the proposed rules. We got a lot of good feedback, got about 2,000 comments through our process. We saw changes that we need to make from that feedback. There were ideas that were premature, either because they needed more thought or because they were better handled through rulemaking than through deviation. There are errors, both in citations and drafting errors to fix. There's a number of other rulemaking in action that need to be addressed. So you're going to see us roll much of that into phase two. So that's one big part of phase two. But if you remember, the executive order didn't just say rewrite the FAR, it said agencies rewrite your FAR supplements and shrink your policy. So you're going to see the agencies make changes in their supplements, in my case, the GSA, to pull that back to bring that into alignment. And we have, within GSA, we have as much agency and service level policy as we had in the FAR. Original FAR was 2,000 pages. We had the GSA was about 500 pages. FAST had about 500 pages of guidance. PBS had 500 pages of guidance. Leasing has 1,000 pages of guidance. Ooh. So there's still a lot to look at that all becomes part of phase two.
Mm-hmm. You said something at the beginning that I think is really interesting.
We got an interesting thing?
About the cultural piece. Many, but one in particular I wanted to pull on. You said one of the cultural challenges you're working on is for government to know how to buy and industry to know how to sell through the revised FAR. What will you do to help industry and to make sure that government knows how to buy based on the work that you all have done?
Now that, I suggest, is really a GovCon community effort. Changing policy does not change culture. I'd suggest there is a role for the government community in the room, and I'd urge anybody from any agency in the room to be pursuing RFO training, to be looking how do you reinforce a message about being willing to be innovative, to try new approaches. How do we support a culture that does things differently? For industry in the room, out of all the strategic acquisition guidance, I would emphasize, most of all, the practitioner albums. That's what we're looking to train our workforce in. That's how we're looking to demonstrate good and interesting and emerging practices. Because they're open, deliberately and purposefully open, look at those, use those, give us feedback on those, comment on those. For the training community, we need you developing the right culture, the right coursework, the right information to reinforce these messages. And this next year, it's going to be a wild year. A lot is going to change. We need industry to be at the table, to participate. Yeah, we always say we want your comments on the rulemaking process, and we're going to want that. But we want you to engage in every aspect of the things that are changing, because if we're going to change culture, you don't change culture just by changing regulations and policy.
First of all, I'm shocked that you've been able to get all of this amazing work done without Mary Davies still being at GSA.
I'm a big Mary Davie fan.
As am I, and I think a lot of people are. So that's amazing to me. You said there are 68 memos, guidance, EOs, and so on. How have you coordinated? You said you've been coordinating all of those things. How have you done that to make sure that everything you're doing aligns with all of those various things?
What we really try to do is look and pull, what are the common themes? What are the messages? What is the big picture we saw in those? And that was messages such as reduce regulation, reduce cost, reduce administrative cost, reduce price, save time, move faster, drive towards commercial solutions, drive towards fixed price contracts, reduce bid protests. So we tried to keep to those 7 themes in the drafting process. That's what I took to be the big global message from the administration directives.
Is that going to be the same process that you're going to follow moving forward, so that as you do as you take comments, as you do all of the processes to talk about in phase 2, that you continue to stay aligned with those?
Yeah, we have to be aligned with the administration. They've set the strategic direction. As a policy professional, it's my job to take that, to implement that, to try and do that in the most appropriate manner possible.
What about the workforce? A lot of discussion going on about the acquisition workforce, its size. There are some questions about that for Larry. What do you want to do, and what do you think you need to do to make sure that the workforce understands, from a cultural perspective, as we've already addressed, but also from a procedural perspective and a governance perspective, what do they need to learn to be able to apply what you're changing?
And it's actually not even what they need to learn. Partially, it's what they need to unlearn. Because we've done business one way for decades. And right now we're trying to say, hey, workforce, you're empowered to go do things. But that doesn't happen just by the wave of a pen. A big piece of what we've been trying to do from the beginning, we built a practitioner team. We detailed Polly Hall over from DHS. She led those efforts. We detailed Eric Choa from FDIC. He served as her deputy in building that. They not only led creation of the strategic guidance, but they worked really closely with the Federal Acquisition Institute and with Defense or Acquisition University, now Warfighting Acquisition University, to try and really have clear messages, to have far-forward office hours every month, to have a number of ways to reach, to communicate, and to share information with the workforce. And I'm super excited that I can now announce Polly Hall will be permanently staying with GSA.
Oh, DHS is so bummed.
I bet they are, but big win. Polly is going to be our lead for maintaining the strategic acquisition guidance moving forward.
Congratulations to Polly.
Definitely.
That's great. Seriously, that's great news for GSA, and DHS is very sad about that. Speaking of DHS and the other agencies, you mentioned that the other agencies will be responsible for going through and revising their acquisition documents, their versions of the FAR. Is there some effort or resource that you'll be providing to them to help them do that, or is that a standalone effort on the part of each agency? And does it matter whether the outcomes of those things are coordinated in some way, whether there are similarities across the agencies?
Our role in coordinating that is mainly through the CAC, the Civilian Agency Acquisition Council. That's one of the 2 councils that make up the FAR Council, and that's our way to reach, to communicate, and to share messaging across all the civilian agencies. So as GSA has been moving, as we're picturing the way that we realign our regulations, we're sharing that and the messages with the agencies, and then they're figuring out what works for them, what's different in their mission or approach, and why they need to take a different direction in some of it.
Is what you're doing in the Revolutionary FAR overhaul more of a model for those agencies, or is what you're doing with the GSAR more a model for those agencies?
It's the same thing.
Okay.
We're looking at the policy landscape. We're looking at those 7 goals that I talked about. We're saying, okay, how do I bring those together? And as we've changed the FAR, we've now created inconsistencies between what's in the FAR and what's in our supplement. So we have to update the supplement to bring it in line, and then look where are other opportunities to reinforce the same message.
Larry talked about, he said that you all want input from industry, and I know you've taken a lot already. What is good input, whether it's a formal comment or something a little less formal? What's good feedback on what you're doing, either from industry partners or from government people?
The piece that we're finding super helpful on the practitioner albums is how is the practice craft changing? Part of why we wanted to take things out of regulation and put them in guidance is recognizing the pace of change is so fast today that we don't want to set in amber the hows of the job. What we really kept in the FAR is the what do you have to do, why do you have to do it, the how do you do it. We tried to get all that out of the FAR, but that needs a home. We want to give the workforce and industry information on how we're looking to operate. So guidance that's helping us understand what is the practice craft and what's emerging, what are new things to think about, that's particularly helpful beyond the traditional rulemaking process.
Tell us who you are and who you're with, and then let us have it.
No, thank you, Mr. Rose. Kamal Khan with MacPar Corporation. And thank you, Mr. Kosas, for your remarks today. I really love how you summarized Phase 1 and what your goals are for Phase 2. But another major initiative mentioned in the April executive order was the consolidation of the GWACs within GSA and also acquisition authority within GSA. What's your vision for that, and how do you see that playing out as well?
Is that your bag, or do you want to save that for Laura at lunchtime?
The question was about consolidation?
Yeah.
I'm sure Laura will have way more than I will to say about that, but just to offer a couple of key thoughts. The consolidation was one of the key executive orders that we were thinking about in drafting the FAR. Part of why we structured many of the elements, especially around FAR 8 and 12, as we did. The basic direction there to save money, to reduce waste, to reduce duplication were paramount parts of the vision. You've seen FAST establish a new business line focused on those repetitive types of services and solutions in OCAS. So it's really opening a whole bold new venture and opportunity for agencies to offload common products and services and dive deep into some of the specifics. One of the things that I think has been really helpful in agency feedback is they've identified where they see a need for a growth and expansion of government-wide contracts. And that opens some really interesting doors for GSA. How do we keep up with those new and emerging requirements and keep growing the portfolio of offerings?
Thank you for the question. We have 56 seconds left, so I will just ask you very quickly, how did this process play out differently than maybe you and your colleagues thought it would when you started down this road in January, February?
From the beginning, we pictured this as a change management effort. We built 4 major work streams. The regulatory work stream itself, the rewriting of all the rules, the practitioners, which resulted in the strategic acquisition guidance. We had pictured a legislative work stream where we developed a series of legislative proposals, and we had built a technology work stream. We've not got as far in the technology work stream as we had hoped, and we'd like to see a lot more progress in the legislative work stream. Technology, I think there's a lot of potential in phase 2 to do more, and you'll see that in the rules as well.
Jeff Kosas of GSA at the ACT-IAC Imagination ELC. You can read more about the FAR overhaul on today's show page at fedgovtoday.com. And my thanks to ACT-IAC for inviting me to be a part of Imagination ELC. The OneGov effort at GSA is an intersection for the agency's IT, acquisition, and AI leaders You'll meet all three of them, David Shive, Laura Stanton, and Zach Whitman, on the next FedGov Today podcast. That's coming Tuesday, and you can listen to every FedGov Today podcast anytime you want on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or on demand at fedgovtoday.com. I'm Francis Rose. Thanks for listening.